United USA. Things I want to talk about happened in Kentucky with the tornado that hit the Amazon building. Some things I thought that were weird, and some other things I want to point out as well. So this is really weird. The U.S. Air Force back in 2014 was talking about they wanted to shut down HAARP in Alaska. Okay, but get this, they didn't. They never shut it down. As a matter of fact, now they're increasing funding. It says the reason the U.S. military is interested in the ionosphere is because this portion of the atmosphere plays a role in transmitting radio signals. HAARP sends radio beams into the ionosphere to study responses from it, one of the few ways to accurately measure the accessibility in part of the atmosphere. For those of you that don't know what HAARP is, it is a massive array of towers that transmit frequency to bend the ionosphere. What it's basically showing here is images from HAARP camera that shows a spectacle like artificial optical emissions superimposed on background natural aurora only during frames when the transmitter was on. The experiment was conducted on March 10, 2004. Now, HAARP has been open for about 25 years. They said they were going to close it, I think back in 2014-15, they were talking about that. And then just last year, here it is. Let me show you an article that I'll post a link in the description that says now they're increasing funding by $9.3 million. So like I said, here it is. Obviously, they have not closed it. And this array of towers that are emitting these frequencies are able to bend the ionosphere and able to direct that energy at any part of the globe that they choose. True story. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up for a moment. The HAARP frequency system, okay, is High Frequency Active Aurora Research Program. That's what it stands for. It was initiated as an ionosphere research program jointly funded by the U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy, University of Alaska. Now, they're not going to tell you directly that this is used for weather modification or manipulation or geoengineering, but they have said that it does manipulate the ionosphere and can be directed anywhere on the globe. Also, take into consideration, this is not the only HAARP system in the world. America is not the only one that has this technology. There's approximately 10 nations or more that have this technology. The main instrument, HAARP, is Ionics Research Instrument that is a high-powered, high-frequency, phased array radio transmitter with a set of 180 antennas. Dude, think about that. 180 antennas? I mean, come on. I mean, yeah. They're doing something up there.
HAARP is a facility to study the ionosphere. Region 60 miles out into space. And that's a region where there's not much density. The air is very thin. It's mostly plasma, which means electrons and ions.
When I saw this facility and saw how unique and interesting it was, so when I decided to do my PhD thesis research using the HAARP facility itself. HAARP stands for the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program.
The federal government spent about $300 million. It's the most exquisite of its kind in the world. It's currently owned and operated by the Air Force Research Lab. And they have other priorities. They've done some tests over the years. Now they want to go do other things. So it's become a bit of an orphan sitting down there in Kokona. The U.S. has the lead in the world in this area. It would be a shame to give that up. The other facilities aren't nearly as flexible or as powerful. And HAARP can do science that the other two can't. There's a chart that shows and compares all the heaters, including air receiver, but you can see that it's quite a bit more powerful and more flexible.
It's an instrument that allows us to make small changes to the ionosphere, and then we can measure the response of the ionosphere in the upper atmosphere to the changes that HAARP is making. Scientists have categorized the various layers of the atmosphere. Most of the weather that we experience occurs in the troposphere. When we fly in commercial aircraft, we're generally flying at the top of the troposphere. Above that is the stratosphere, and above that is the mesosphere, and above that is the thermosphere. And the ionosphere is basically part of the thermosphere, which extends from about 80 to 100 kilometers altitude all the way up to about 1,000 kilometers altitude. And so the ionosphere is generally what we refer to as the partially ionized portion of the thermosphere. It's too high for weather balloons, and it's too low for many satellites. And sure, we can launch rockets through the ionosphere too, as we do at Poker Flat, but those are very fast but expensive experiments. The reason why we care about the ionosphere, particularly for radio communication, is that radio waves, when traveling through free space, behave differently when they travel through a region of charged particles or plasma. The ionosphere is basically a partially ionized plasma, and so one of the things that can happen to radio waves that travel through a plasma is that they can be bent, their polarization can change, they can be absorbed, and since so much of our lives is really dependent on radio communication, either communicating to satellites or for navigation with GPS, which is also communicating with satellites essentially, or over-the-horizon communication or over-the-horizon radar, it's really important for us to understand how radio waves are affected by the ionosphere, and in some cases how radio waves affect the ionosphere in the case of HAARP.
So what he just said right there, he said that it's important
that they can be bent, their polarization can change.
It's important for them to understand how the frequencies are affecting the thermosphere, the ionosphere, stratosphere, atmosphere in general overall, right? So you can see by the red lines right here, what they're showing is from the low frequency wave reflected, it's showing whether it's higher frequency, very high frequency, low frequency, it's showing that the lower frequencies are being bounced from tower to tower. The high frequencies are being beamed up towards basically the force field of the Earth, right? That's basically what it is. And what they're doing is you can see the red arrows are bouncing up to the ionosphere and then bouncing back down directed at a certain part of the globe, right? So by their own words, they're actually admitting and letting all of us know in so many words that what they're doing is they're directing energy and reflecting it and beaming it back down somewhere, right? And researching what that does.
Images of the aftermath of the deadly tornado are indescribable.
Watching that tornado come down and then just go right back up was spine shaking.
Yeah, it looks pretty strange to me. It's like it literally just hit the building and nothing else. Just came down, went right back up. Out there in Midwest, in the South. I'm not saying that this entire event was deliberate or weather modification that targeted certain areas for specific reasons or there's a conspiracy behind it. There could be, but I'm not saying that. But what I am saying in this particular case where we're looking at the Amazon building, I'm seeing something very unusual. It literally looks like the tornado, it could be a coincidence. That's the only other rational explanation. It literally came down like right there, boom. Even the worker at the gas station had said
the aftermath of the deadly tornado are indescribable.
Watching that tornado come down and then just go right back up was spine shaking.
Watching it come down and go right back up was spine shaking. So you're seeing and hearing a eyewitness that said watching it come down, destroy the building, and go right back up and disappear, right? So you heard it. Here it is. Here's a prime example.